Shooting it raw?
Yes, shooting it raw. Sonalie, how do I say your last name?
Figueiras.
Figueiras? What kind of name is that? Where's that from?
It's Argentinian. So a lot of people think it's Portuguese, but my husband is half Argentinian, so that's the Argentinian name. That's not my birth name.
Okay. Oh, okay. Got it. Now, I asked you to send me a photo and you sent me a photo of some mapo tofu that you made. So why don't you describe for people who are listening in what the photo is?
So it's a photo of a homemade dinner from a couple weeks ago. It's mapo tofu, which is a very popular Sichuan cuisine dish from China. This one is a little bit special because it's made with omni pork, which is a minced pork alternative that actually comes from Hong Kong, in the sense that the company that made it is from Hong Kong.
Why is this representative of where you are in your life?
Okay, well, it's basically a confluence of everything that matters to me. So one, I grew up in a family that is obsessed with food. My grandmother is from my Indian grandmother in Delhi, was really famous for her table. She was well known across the city, and still today I'll meet people when I go there that reminisce about her incredible roast chicken or her brownies. Or she was quite a special lady because she made incredible Indian desi food, but she also was very ahead of her time. And because my grandfather was in the army, she spent a lot of time on army bases around India and then later in Japan. And so she learned from a lot of times there were American army families there, and she was really interested to learn American baking. And then she brought that back to Delhi and started doing baking classes. So she was quite avant-garde, and she was very warm and very hospitable, and there were always people at the house, and she was always having dinners, and the food was always amazing. And then I grew up with my mom, who took it to the next level. Another, really just incredible cook. My mom can cook stuff from all over the world. I mean, from Sichuan food to Japanese food to Indian food to Spanish food to French food. It doesn't matter. She's also an incredible baker, very American in style as well. And so I grew up in a house that, food was where we connected, where we shared every meal at a table. And we still do as often as possible. And then I married someone that was really obsessed with food as well, and I'm obsessed with food. So food is life.
People are obsessed with food. People want to eat.
Some people. I actually do know quite a few people who don't care what they eat, which I always find a bit strange, but it is around. But yes, and I think social media and the visual nature of how we connect online has made the celebration of loving food and studying food and cooking food much more interesting and much more kind of exciting. And so it's a great time to be, a foodie, that dreaded word. Mm-hmm. And it's a great time to really just love food. Right. I am somebody that really is interested as well. For me, food is also about kind of culture and expression. And so I'm quite interested in the way food relates different cultures to each other. I remember one of my favorite books is this book about the history of curry and how curry kind of started and evolved all around the world, and how you have all these different forms of curry. And so I guess because I'm a cultural anthropologist by background, that really fascinates me. So food history, food facts. I spend a lot of time reading about, even kind of food philosophy. Mm-hmm. And of course, that is very linked to my work. Green Queen is, the leading media in Asia when it comes to sustainability. And even though we cover a lot of everything from fashion to beauty to climate change we cover anything that's relevant to health and sustainability. Food is obviously a huge part of the site, and it's a big part of how the site got famous and got popular. And of course, even as the site has evolved and as I've evolved in how I eat, it's been a lot through food. And I think food is something we all need to do to survive. So it is a basic need as opposed to many other things that we focus on that are not basic needs. It is a defining expression of, it's one of the most kind of basic ways to express yourself as a human being is to cook. Right. It's also one of the most beautiful ways you can give something to someone else.
Sure. For example, the first time I met Delian, she spent the weekend. This was back when internet dating was a brand new thing, right? So 2001. And so I dared her to come spend the weekend. So she drives 700 kilometers, spends the weekend with me. And one of the things that she did was she prepared a curry for me. And, she grew up basically, her stepmother is Indian. So she grew up learning all about how to make proper, curry from scratch. And that's what she did at my place. And yeah, as you say, making food for somebody is this basic connection. And yeah, I totally get that for sure.
Right. It's exactly. And I mean, didn't that make you feel kind of,
horny?
I don't know.
Horny for sure. It was great. Really connected.
I was going to say connected, but okay.
Oh, sorry.
But it was her sharing a part of herself, Absolutely. Both as an expression and also as her identity, right? Yeah. And the fact that she made curry tells you a story about who she is. Like, Absolutely. As you said, which her stepmother was Indian, which you probably wouldn't have necessarily thought about in another way. So it's just really, food is love, you know, at its most basic level. And I truly believe that. And I think people who don't care about food, it's either because they just haven't eaten good food or they're just not letting themselves kind of open up to the power of great, delicious food. And so
you're explaining this to me, and you shared me an image of mapo tofu, and you grew up in Hong Kong.
Right. So going back, exactly. So going back to the image and why we cook that. So obviously I grew up in Hong Kong, exposed to some of the best Chinese food in the world, not just Cantonese food, but Sichuan food and Fujian cuisine and all kinds of Shanghainese dishes. And, China is such a rich country. It's really sad to kind of limit it to the term Chinese food. But I love Sichuan food. Mm-hmm. It is a cuisine that I grew to love thanks to my now husband. He is a searcher of spiciness. And so when I met him, I actually grew up in a house with not a lot of spice, despite my mother being Indian. She always made more milder food. And so when I met him and I realized he was a chili sauce connoisseur, a Sichuan lover, I got into it. And then now I think I'm even more into it than him. And I chase that kind of high.
For sure.
And I actually love Sichuan food because Sichuan food is not just about that heat and that spiciness. It's also about that mala, that numbing from the Sichuan pepper corn. And I just love it. So mapo tofu is one of my favorite dishes. And when we became vegetarian, it was one of the dishes I wanted to veganize because and that's why this photo is so emblematic of kind of where I am in my life, because I've started cooking when I was really, really young. I think I made my first pesto pasta when I was, 6 or 7. I spent my time in the kitchen with my mom and my nanny, who also became our family cook and who developed into quite an incredible cook.
Right.
And so between her and my mom, that was my life,
Sure.
And so when I realized that our global food systems were broken and everything was wrong with how we ate, that was a sort of a heartbreak for me, because for a few years, I sort of had to mourn all these things that I wasn't going to eat anymore if I was going to kind of hold myself accountable to being someone who really made choices that were better for humanity, for the planet, for animals. And so there, the fact is that my mom is an incredible cook, and there are so many dishes that I grew up eating that I'm now not going to eat anymore because they have meat and dairy.
In this particular, so the image is taken from the top, I guess. The pan's sitting on the range or whatever you call it. So it's on the element. It's a non-stick pan. The image is essentially 90% of it, 95% of it is this pan with a super close up. Chunks of tofu, lots of red pepper, and I'm assuming this vegan ground pork. Now,
you've got the sauce, the the domajo, that like the chili bean paste,
Right.
the fermented chili bean paste that is very common to Sichuan food.
Mm-hmm.
You've got the tofu, which we're so lucky in Hong Kong. We can get 100 types of fresh tofu everywhere. So there's just no excuse not to kind of explore that. And then you've got the omni pork.
Mm-hmm. So what's your connection to the company beyond just saying, oh, this is great, I want to eat it? Do you have a personal connection?
I would say I have a very close connection to the company. So the company Omni Pork is part of the kind of mega multi-channel empire of David Young and his kind of Green Monday umbrella. So Green Monday is their foundation where they really push to get restaurants and people to kind of adopt Green Monday, which is not eating meat on Mondays. And then they've got Green Common, which operates restaurants, cafes, and delis across the city, as well as basically the city's first vegetarian deli and restaurant, and shopping chain. So everything in their shop is vegetarian, and I think 99% is actually vegan. And then they also started this company called Omni Pork, which is the first Asia-based, kind of founded by Asians, plant-based meat alternative that falls into this kind of food tech 2.0 world. Because obviously, I don't want to not explain that, we've always had meat alternatives in Asia. In fact, we've always had many meat alternatives in Asia because of things like tofu, but also seitan and things like that. And in the Buddhist restaurants which are very popular across the region, Buddhists don't eat meat. They try not to harm animals. They actually even don't eat onions and garlic. So they have their own kind of way of eating. And in those restaurants, there's always been these kind of meat replacements. But the plant-based food 2.0 kind of world that is exploding right now, that is made very popular by two big American companies, Beyond Meat and Impossible Foods. They're different because they're not just an alternative to meat. They are trying to mimic all the properties of meat, and that, or seafood or dairy. In this case, I'm going to talk mostly about meat, but they're trying to give you the same texture. They're trying to give you the same kind of mouthful feel. They're trying to also give you the same or better nutritional profile than meat. So a lot of times that means protein, because obviously a lot of people do eat meat for protein. So that's really that kind of evolution of the meat alternative made from plants is where it got really exciting, and it kind of got couched in this kind of very tech forward, innovation centric kind of language, and of course, as I said, Impossible Foods and Beyond Meat are at the forefront of this.
Right.
And Beyond Meat is actually distributed in many countries in Asia, including in Hong Kong, by David Young's Green Common.
Got it.
So Green Common, on top of having the restaurants and the shops, they also run a B2B distribution business where they bring in interesting plant-based brands from the US and other parts of the world. And so they have things like Daya cheese, they have Miyoko's cheese, they have Califia milks and yogurts, they have Beyond Meat products, they have Gardein products, another brand of meat and seafood replacements, and then they have Ura chicken, which is from Spain.
Your accent is quite American sounding. So why is that?
So I'm half French Italian and I'm half Indian, but I was born and grew up in Hong Kong. Until I was 14, I was at a French school, so I actually had more of a British accent because we spoke English at home as well. And then we moved to Singapore when I was 14, and I switched to the American school. And then I ended up back in Hong Kong, graduated from HKS, the American school here. And then I ended up, after my gap year, I ended up in Philly, where I went to university. About when I was 15, 16, I really started having a very American accent. I think the American accent is very, it's hard to kind of not get it.
It's very, it's, as you say, it's very easy. And go out to Savannah and sooner or later you'll start sounding like, like a bit of a banjo for sure.
and basically and a lot of people actually think I'm from California, which is hilarious. I always get that.
Right.
And I think because I work in health and sustainability and things like that.
Sure.
So that's how I ended up with this.
And what did you study in UPenn?
So I originally studied math and comparative literature, but after a really shitty time with the math department, who wasn't interested in female mathematicians, I switched to cultural anthropology. So I had a very liberal arts education, really focused on kind of things like international development, conflict resolution. Cultural anthropology is quite different than kind of traditional anthropology, because you don't focus as much on the evolution, and you focus a lot more on the evolution of culture. And that really worked for me. I didn't even know you could study that before I went to university. And it's been a huge help to everything I've done.
Yeah. Because coming from your Hong Kong, very blended culture, Singapore, and then going to the US, you probably have this experience to pull from to start making your own connections.
Absolutely. And it just really, I'm fascinated by the evolution of why people do what they do and why they think what they think. Actually, this morning, my idea, every day I have ideas, and then my team or my family just cuts me down, because otherwise it would just be too many things.
You're an entrepreneur.
Yeah, I mean, that's my DNA, so can't stop that. But I definitely don't pursue everything. But I did have this idea. So last night we made, my mom made, based on a recipe I had highlighted for her. She made this dish called tombette, which is this wonderful dish from Mallorca in Spain that involves kind of roasted aubergines, tomato sauce, and sliced potatoes, and it's sort of like a bake. Mm-hmm. And it's apparently very common over in Mallorca. And I felt like it reminded me a lot of ratatouille, mm-hmm. and even kind of eggplant parmigiana, and it's Italy. And so I did some digging, and I found out that tombette is actually kind of the Mallorcan version of ratatouille, the Southern French dish. Right. And over the last summer, when I was in France, I was doing a lot of digging about Provençal cuisine and Provençal culture. And I found out that the culture is often referred to in France as Occitan culture. Mm-hmm. And it actually is very much connected to a whole part of Spain that also has Occitan culture.
Right.
And actually the Occitan language is very similar to certain dialects and languages in Spain. So basically the point is that every time I find these connections between different food dishes, I'm always so amazed. And I had this idea to do this TV show where you kind of explore a dish and all the dishes that it's similar to, and kind of basically how connected we are with food, and how food is actually just like language. It's kind of an evolution of adaptations and changes from different parts of the world. But at heart, it started out as the same thing.
Right. How did you get to where you are today?
Well, I guess I started, basically I had this kind of, these health issues that had been plaguing me for a long time. And I could never get any relief from doctors or from like conventional medicine. And it had been years that I wasn't feeling well. And so eventually I got diagnosed with endometriosis and Hashimoto's thyroiditis. And these are both diseases that have no cure, that affect women a lot more than they affect men, that have very few research dollars poured into. So there's just not very much interest from the medical and pharmaceutical community to get into these things. But they are very unpleasant diseases in terms of your daily life, and the symptoms and the issues that arise from them are really just, they really damage your quality of life. So I started doing research about how I could deal with it myself. And that's how I ended up in Change How You Eat. And when it got to changing how I ate, it got to, it's not just what you eat, it's where that food comes from. And so the beginning of my journey was, okay, I love food, I love to eat, but I need to eat what's best for me. And then I need to figure out where I'm getting this food from. And that's how I got into kind of organic agriculture and sustainable food systems. And that's when it all kind of tumbled into, it's not just the food you eat, it's the products you use, and it's the paint that's on your walls, and it's the clothes you wear. And I just, the more I research, and I'm a researcher by nature, I'm a total, I spend hours researching stuff. I would say that is probably my number one hobby, not just for work. So, I mean, I think I read like 2 to 3 hours a day, just like researching, learning. And I like to read. I don't like to watch videos. I know I'm a total anti-digital person. I'm old-fashioned.
I wouldn't call you
a Luddite. Thank you. That's the word. I like reading. I know it's so old-fashioned. And so basically, the more I learned, the more I realized what is happening. Why has no doctor ever said anything to me like this? Why is no one talking about this? Why am I not learning this in school or when I was in school? And why isn't this on everyone's kind of headlines? And, you know, the more I looked into it, the more I realized, you know, this is crazy. It's just, there's not enough attention about this, and there's not enough awareness, and people have no idea the food they're eating. They don't know that, you know, their chicken has hormones and their beef is full of antibiotics because they're fed the wrong diet. And you know, the vegetables they eat are full of pesticides, and it's not just that, it's the soil is so depleted that we have no minerals in our food, which is why we need all these supplements, and then the supplements don't even necessarily work a lot of the time. So all of this stuff, and then just kind of, and we're not feeling well, and we're getting sicker, and we're spending all this money on healthcare, but no one is talking about, you know, the most basic thing, which is what we put on our plate, you know, 2 to 3 times a day. And so I basically changed how I lived, and I started this blog, Green Queen, with no intention of it being anything more than just a blog. And because I had accumulated all these resources and I changed my life, and it was very difficult to do that in Hong Kong at the time, and not just in Hong Kong, in most of the world. We're talking in 2008, 2009. And so I had accumulated all these resources. I called it my little green book, and I realized, you know, maybe someone else might want to use these resources because I've done all the work. So I published this very basic WordPress blog, got a nice lady in the US to make me this logo, and that was it. The name Green Queen, I honestly, I say this, it's totally true. It came to me in a dream. I checked out if the domain was available. The .com wasn't, but the .com.hk was. And other than the fact that there's a very popular strain of marijuana that's called Green Queen, it wasn't really a name that had, you know, a brand that belonged to anyone else. So I thought, well, this is great. And I put it out there, and I had no expectations of anything, but I was still working in corporate, in banking. And at the same time, though, as I had started to get really into sustainable food and kind of where to get it. And when I realized that there was just such a gap in getting that food, and that organic food was really expensive because not enough people were buying it, and not enough people was also businesses. So I had been playing with this idea. I wanted to kind of create a green Starbucks. So sort of like a coffee and food chain that was completely kind of green. Okay. And that was really healthy. So all the milk would be plant-based, and there'd be coconut sugar, and you know, the coffee would be organic and you know, single origin. This is years ago, before, you know, the coffee culture kind of got big. And so as I was researching that, I was looking for suppliers, and I ended up on Alibaba, which was not a public company yet, and not very famous, and Tmall and all of that was still very much China based, and not many people, you know, had heard of it outside of China. But you know, Alibaba's story is that they got big originally from their sourcing site, where they connected the whole world to Chinese factories. And using the site, I realized that you couldn't find anything organic. And if you did find anything that was organic, if you were lucky and you searched for a while, there was no way to be sure that it was really organic, that it was certified.
Sure.
And so I just realized, well, this is crazy. There's all these certified organic farmers and producers, but there's no one to find them. And so that's how I had the idea for Ekowarehouse, which is my other business, basically a matching platform for sourcing certified organic products from all around the world. Oh,
okay. Well, so that's definitely going to be added to the show notes so people can check that out.
Right. So it is for businesses. So it's a B2B platform. And so we started working on that in 2013. And when we started working on that, we realized that we were trying to teach ourselves about digital marketing and SEO, because we didn't have any budget for marketing Ekowarehouse. So we wanted to build the site in a way that when people would search for organic products on Google, our site would basically, it would come up first,
right,
which is basically what SEO is.
Right.
And so I showed my partner at the time, I said, oh, well, I have Green Queen. And she looked at the analytics of Green Queen, and we realized that, oh my goodness, there were a few thousand people coming to Green Queen every month. Mm-hmm. Even though I wasn't updating the content much and I wasn't doing much with it. And we, not only that, but we were the first result on Google pages for a lot of terms, including where to find organic fruits in Hong Kong or whatever. And so we thought, well, it was going to take a while to do the software backend for Ekowarehouse. So we thought, well, why don't we give Green Queen a go just for fun? Sure. And just to kind of feet wet on digital marketing. And also at heart, I always say that I wasn't meant to end up in media, but if you look at my past, it actually makes complete sense. Writing was always in my blood. I just I hadn't looked at it that way. Mm-hmm. And so I said to my partner at the time, I said, well, I can write like 3 articles a week because I have so much to write about. I have so many people I'd love to interview. We can start sending out a newsletter every week. And so we started sending out this newsletter at the end of 2013. And it's now been, 6 years that we've been sending that newsletter every Monday. Mm. Green Queen just took off from day one.
Right.
From day one, like the subscriber base grew. We started having, to be honest, in the beginning, I wasn't even thinking of it as a business. Right. And after 2 years and realizing that we had quite a sizable audience and that, we started getting companies writing to us saying, well, we want to advertise with you. Can you send us your media kit? And we were thinking, what's a media kit? We had no idea what that was. And then we had people saying, okay, well, we'd like to work with you on an event and this and that. And then I had this amazing opportunity to do this. Have you ever been to the San Francisco Ferry Building Market?
Nope.
Okay, so it's one of the most incredible things to do in San Francisco. So every Saturday, there's a massive farmers market at the Ferry Building in the city. And it's just amazing. I mean, if you love food and you love kind of where food comes from, it's amazing. You have all these restaurants that have stalls and they make these like incredible creations. You have all the farmers that are there with the most beautiful produce. All the food artisans are there, everything. And I just always felt like, why isn't there something like this in Hong Kong? And so one day I was, Tika? Mm-hmm. Okay, so I was in Tika and I was having a little tea with the former, he's not in Hong Kong anymore, but he's the founder of Happy Cow Ice Cream.
Oh, okay. Oh, really?
Okay. So, yeah. So Isaac. And so we were having a tea and I had become really excited because I had just done a piece on Green Queen about all these little because they were new, not to make them small, but they were all these new food artisans. People creating kind of raw snacks or dairy-free ice cream or jams or what have you. And I was thinking, why isn't there a place where you can go and discover these people? And lo and behold, there was a lovely lady at the next table who obviously heard my very loud voice in the very small tea shop. And she heard me going on about this. And I was saying about the San Francisco building, and Isaac's American, so he knew it, and he's from California. And so we were just talking and I was saying, why isn't there something like this in Hong Kong? And, there's organic farms and they have nowhere to go. And so this lovely lady called Emma, who was working at the Space, she heard me and she said, listen, we have a free weekend coming up and we don't have any bookings. And, the Space was an event space on Hollywood Road. And she said, it's August, so I can give it to you for a really big discount. But why don't you do your market at the Space? And so I think in 5 weeks, we put the whole thing together and it was magical.
Oh, wow.
It was incredible. It was the first time that the whole healthy, artisanal, made and locally food community got together. We had food craft, which they were not called that at the time, but they were there. It was incredible. It was packed. There were over 1,000 people for every day. And we got coverage, I think, in 60 media. It was crazy.
Okay, so around us, Hong Kong right now, yesterday recorded, I think it was 3 new infections. When I asked you to send me an image, you sent me this image, but around us, there's still the pandemic going on, and that's clearly changed how you're working and how your team is working.
Well, we are surrounded by the coronavirus, and I think the coronavirus has a lot to do with our broken global food systems. So I see a direct link in the work that I do every day and that our team does, and we are working remotely for their safety. We spend our days covering, sharing, researching information about the climate crisis, our broken systems, which have a lot to do with food, but also our broken fashion system, our broken everything system, our broken capitalist system. And there's a direct link between where we've ended up and all of these topics. And so, and actually the other thing I think that's quite emblematic about the picture is that being stuck at home, and I think something like 1/3 of the world is currently on lockdown. We are technically not in full lockdown, but 1/3 of the world population is in actual lockdown. They're not really supposed to leave the house other than for someone to go get groceries. It has forced people to confront what they eat and to cook at home. And it in some ways it's been magical. People have loved it. There are flour shortages reported all around the world because people are baking so much. But the point is that this is all connected. So the photo for me represents so many things. It represents my love for food and the fact that food is how I ended up what I do. I run an organic food sourcing platform, and I run a green media, which has a lot to do with food. I cook every day, and so does my family, and we try new recipes all the time, and we do everything we can to kind of veganize all our favorite recipes from around the world. I think it also then represents the kind of renewed focus on food right now because of coronavirus. And then, of course, it also represents us asking questions about how we got here. And of course, there is a connection between kind of exotic animal markets and deforestation and kind of biodiversity loss. So all these wild animals that we wouldn't be kind of seeing on a daily basis and have nowhere to go. And so then they interact with either farm animals or kind of industrial livestock animals or with humans. And that's how disease, zoonotic diseases spread.
Clearly, yeah. So in terms of Green Queen, if we go back, what event or milestone did you hit that was really satisfying?
We are having quite a milestone moment right now. Since January, Green Queen was a really small operation. And the couple of milestones were when I started to realize that it was actually my second business, not just my hobby. And that was around kind of 2015 where I started, in 2016 where I started to take it seriously. I think when we passed 100,000 visits a month in 2017, that was pretty great. And now we're at 1.2 million visits every quarter.
Wow.
Since January. So we're in the bigger leagues now. And I mean, we have readers, we have investors that write to me every day and tell me that they can't live without our newsletter. We're doing things like putting out, the first ever Asia Alternative Protein Industry Report, which has now been downloaded by people from over 50 countries and covered across the media and used as a resource. We have a very exciting zero waste vegan meal plan made with Asian recipes in mind. So we're doing things that are just like much bigger. We also have an amazing event series. We have our UN SDG plant-based dinner series where we work with a restaurant and we challenge them to create a fully vegan menu. And then we highlight one of the SDGs by bringing in an NGO that is tackling that SDG to talk for 15 minutes before the dinner.
Sorry, what is SDG? Maybe I forgot.
UN SDGs are Sustainable Development Goals. So there's 17 goals that we're all working towards for 2030. So in order to raise awareness about those goals, we started this dinner series. It's been hugely popular. So we've had 5 dinners and they've all been sold out. We haven't been able to schedule our next dinner because of the virus. Mm-hmm. We also have a wellness series called Release. We had a hugely successful event in December. It was all centered around CBD, cannabidiol oil, mm-hmm. To help people use it as a tool for their well-being.
One book that you've read in the past month that you thought was just so eye-opening. Go.
A book that I thought was so eye-opening. I haven't read it in the past month, but the book that really I recommend everyone to read is Marion Nestle's Unsavory Truth, which is basically about how Big Food adopted Big Tobacco's playbook to use nutritional studies to kind of completely mess up our food system.
Okay. Well, I'll put that link so people can find it and read it for sure.
One thing coronavirus has done, and I really like, this is not my term, but someone called it the Great Pause.
Ah, right.
And I think that's where we're at. It's been a huge pause of everything, kind of work, global systems, financial systems. And I hope that it has been an opportunity for people to reflect. And our systems are broken. It doesn't work. They're unequal. They're unsustainable.
The language that you're using is that the system is broken, that the world, it's very dark. Is the world so dark and bad that everything is broken in Sonalie's world? I
appreciate, optimists. And I think that it's great to have that worldview. That is not how my brain works. I love to listen to the kind of the optimist argument. And obviously, on some level, I have some of that in me. Otherwise, I wouldn't get out of bed in the morning to do what I do.
You wouldn't be somebody.
Sure, I'm a risk taker for sure. But I'm a little bit more of a cynic than an optimist. I've been like that since I was a child. But I guess this is the quote that best describes what I choose to do, which is that the only way out of darkness and depression is service for those who have no choices or voices.
Oh, wow.
So that's a line that I wrote about why I do what I do and who I am. Mm. So if I didn't do what I do, I would be very depressed.
For sure.
Because it's definitely dark in my mind.
But wouldn't you...
Because I don't know why, but I seek out the pain.
Okay.
I want to know about people's pain. I want to know about their struggles. I have no interest really in seeking out the superficial stuff that kind of permeates social media and all that. I want to know why people are struggling and how they're struggling, and I want them to tell me their stories. And then I want to serve them.
And isn't there something very tactile, tangible, sensory, raw, really, to focus on food? Because food is like you consume, you if you savor it, if you're you're really kind of getting into it, and in a way that's a big focus of your attention as well.
Totally. And I think you've just kind of found the connection and the good, because at the end of the day, food and creating food and cooking is joy. So I believe in the pursuit of joy. But that doesn't mean I'm an optimist about what is wrong with the world. Okay. And I do think we have broken systems, and I do think it's important to highlight them. But we sort of have this rule in Green Queen, like the 50-50 thing, where we sort of do like 50%, here's what's really going on in the world, here's the bad news, here's where we're at. And then the 50%, here are the inspiring people and solutions that are going to give you hope. Well, and that's how we balance it.
Right. And for people to know, okay, well, what can I do?
Absolutely. And I think that's part of our job. We have to give people, we say that we inform, we inspire, and then we empower. Nice. So informing is kind of the bad news, or sometimes just the facts, just what it is, the status quo. Mm-hmm. Inspiring is connecting you to these bigger ideas and goals so that you feel something inside of you that makes you want to act. And then empowering you is giving you the resources, the tools, so that you can act.
Wow. I expected that you'd give a really good conversation, and this has been really great. So, excuse me. Any last bits of wisdom or thoughts you'd like to leave the listener with? Just that, I guess, reiterating what I believe, which is that serving others, when we get out of ourselves, we help ourselves and we help those around us. Mm-hmm. And service is a very broad term, interpret it as you will. I completely get what you're trying to say, and you're right. I mean, I agree with you completely. Going back to what you said about things being tactile, service, sometimes just going and volunteering
it just gets you out of your head, and it's very kind of tangible, and it's very kind of powerful.
For sure. But do wear a mask these days.
Of course. And right now it is difficult to do some of those things. Yeah. I really appreciate you having me on this conversation. I appreciate the chance to kind of just share and talk more about, the things that matter to me. So thank you very much.
Oh, my pleasure. Yeah, you're a great guest. I'm going to have you on again. Thank you so much.
Good.
Okay. Thank you, Sonalie.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much for joining me, Randall Fancy, for this episode of Shooting It Raw. I really appreciate it. If you want to learn more about the show in general or today's guest in particular, be sure to check out the episode notes at www.shootingraw.com. That's shooting-it-raw.com. I appreciate everyone who takes some time out of their day to give Shooting It Raw a listen. So get out there, make amazing photos, and be sure to appreciate how amazing the world is. Gratitude and a sense of humor